Test.
Test.
Test. That was the most dramatic.
Test.
Test.
I didn't even know it was a competition.
Oh, sorry.
Everything's a competition.
That's right.
Comic-Con.
You're way off in the corner. You're looking at my back.
It's okay. These microphones obviously benefit no one except for us, primarily. Because
They benefit the unknown studio.
that's right.
You will be vague background noise.
But when you laugh and clap and cheer, do so with rigor,
Gusto.
with gusto.
You laugh.
Are you ready?
Do we expect anybody else?
Probably not.
Okay, let's just
We
go.
always expect that this
Well,
will
we
be
hope.
show up.
So the way we normally do this, because we are recording our podcast, is anybody familiar with the Unknown Studio at all?
Yay!
Half of the room, okay.
That's great.
You gave me a coffee mug last year, right?
What's that?
You gave me a coffee mug
I
last year.
did. Clinton got a coffee mug.
There you go.
Limited edition. There are no more.
There are no more of them, and some of them were signed, so they are even more limited.
So I'm not gonna get a coffee mug?
I'm
We
sorry.
ran out long before we knew we were going to interview you, but I do have a special gift for you, and that's coming later.
All right, because I don't drink coffee anyway, so it works out.
So we have a podcast. It runs twice a month. It's called The Unknown Studio, and we basically talk to interesting Edmontonians about the interesting stuff they're doing, and probably Star Trek comes up, because Adam really loves Star Trek. That may come up, I'm just forewarning you. We were asked by Diane, actually, to interview Joe for his interview panel this evening, because she thought it would be neat, and we were like, that is incredibly neat. So
I'm going to endeavor to prove her wrong, though. I'm going to try to make it not neat.
Well, and I want to point out, I am neither an Edmontonian nor interesting, so.
Well, I would disagree at least at one of those points.
You mean he's from it?
That is correct. So yes, so we are going to do the format of our show when we record it, which is a little jumbled because a lot of what ends up going into the final product is in post-production. So if at the end we talk about our sponsors and at the front we do our introduction, just bear with us. We will talk to Joe. So.
And so usually it starts with me asking Scott a question. And last time I asked him about his mustache, so I can't ask him about that.
Nope.
Hey Scott,
Yes, Ed.
which house would you belong to if you lived in the land of the Seven Kingdoms?
Doctor House?
That is acceptable. You'd live in Dr. House.
That is correct.
Okay.
That's why he has a problem with his leg. Coming to you almost live. Where are we coming from? We didn't decide that.
How about from Grant McEwen's? How about from PureSpec?
Okay. Coming to you almost live from the Pure Speculation Festival. This is the Unknown Studio. I'm Scott.
I'm Adam.
We are your delightful hosts.
Delicious, even.
Quite. We are kind of almost live and kind of actually live for one of our few times we've done that.
We're sitting in front of a room of about 3,000 people right now at Grant McEwen.
Yep.
And they're waiting for us to talk to the gentleman seated to my right.
And to my left.
Right in between us.
Indeed.
I'm going home.
So Joe Wos, did I get that right?
You got that right, it is Joe.
Joe
And Wos, yes.
Joe Wos is the founder, among other many things that he's done, of the Toonseum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
In the US of A.
Yes, that
Yes.
is nowhere in Alberta. And Joe, you've been a cartoonist and a performer and an artist. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, how you got your start, and in a few hours or minutes, we'll get to the Toonseum itself.
Sure, absolutely. When I was 4 years old, my parents caught me drawing on the walls with a crayon. They taped paper up on the walls and said, go ahead. And I've been drawing ever since. The point at which I became a cartoonist, though, came a little bit later in kindergarten. At that time, I grew up in Pittsburgh during the 1970s. The 1970s for kids were a very scary time in the United States. We lived in constant fear of two things, nuclear holocaust and the metric system. Thankfully, neither came to pass in the United States anyway. But my dad worked in a steel mill, and I had actually wanted to be a steel worker like my father.
Really?
And whenever he would point to where he worked, we had something, we called it economic development. We now found out it's called pollution. And it filled the sky, so we would just see like this massive gray cloud. And my dad worked in what's called a powerhouse. I thought, wow, how cool, my dad makes power. Everybody wants power, my dad makes it. So in kindergarten, Mr. Weaver, my art teacher, I still remember this, told us we had to draw where we wanted to work when we grew up for a parent-teacher day. Kindergarten, I have to know where I'm gonna work when I grow up.
Well, they really do want to fast track you.
Well, they do, and it's, yeah, so it was, so I took a piece of paper and a black crayon, and I just filled it. I scribbled all over the thing till it was covered with what I perceived to be what a mill looked like. And the teacher, Mr. Weaver, just freaked out on me. He's like, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. You can't follow instruction. You don't know how to draw. This is ridiculous. Like, go sit in a corner. I was heartbroken. And then when my parents came in, he showed my dad drawing. He said, this is what your son did. He was supposed to draw where he wanted to work when he grew up. My dad looked at it and said, that is the best drawing I've ever seen of the mill. That is perfect. How can you live in Pittsburgh and not know that is a mill? And at that moment, it was my dad saw what the teacher couldn't. And in that exact moment, I realized I wanted to be a cartoonist because no one can tell you you're wrong when you're a cartoonist. If your drawing looks funny, it's supposed to. I wanted to create, I didn't want to copy. So from that point on, I knew that's it. I'm going to be a cartoonist, not a still worker. I'm going to draw whatever I want, and no one is ever going to tell me I'm wrong.
And you knew it had to be cartoons? You didn't
Well,
think art?
that was, no, it was out of spite. Mr. Weaver was sort of an amateur cartoonist. So it was purely out of spite of just being better than him. I learned a long time ago, and I think I learned this from Charles M. Schultz, that sometimes we exceed in life not in spite of people, but to spite people. And so I actually ended up going back to that school 20 years later to perform. Did my show on stage, and Mr. Weaver, I told him the whole story, and as I walked off the stage, he leaned to the principal and said, I taught him everything he knows. So he was kind of right. But yeah, cartoons, because, a tree, you look at a tree, if you draw a tree and it doesn't look like a tree, you kind of messed it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at it, how did you get it wrong? With a cartoon, I mean, come on, a sponge can wear pants and talk. There's no way to get it wrong. And I love that about cartoons.
And SpongeBob doesn't actually look like a sponge, like the sea creature. He looks like a sponge that you wash your dishes with.
Yeah, and Mickey Mouse, I mean, I don't know what he's supposed to be. A mouse, apparently.
Yeah, but you would never know.
No, you put that in a room, no one's gonna go, eek, a mouse. I mean, it's some weird looking geometric rat. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, so throughout your childhood, did your focus shift immediately with you? This sounds like a turning point for you.
It was.
At a very young age.
At a very young age, there was a sort of immediate shift of saying, well, it was really driven by me saying, boy, that teacher was really rotten. It's like there can't be a wrong way to draw. There can't be.
Yeah.
And immediately I just started drawing constantly, just trying to perfect my own personal craft. But at the same time, wanting to show others that this idea of wrong in art just didn't apply. And I wanted to switch that. So that really was a turning point.
That's incredible.
And then I had, several others that encouraged it. One of the main ones is I'm dyslexic. So I had a lot of trouble learning how to read and write. And drawing was what got me through it. Because I would take my letters, which were bouncing around on the page as I looked at them, and I would take the letters and start to draw words, using the letters as building blocks for the imagery. And that really taught me how to read, how to write, how to draw, and all that. So I had good teachers, except for Mr. Weaver.
So-
You stink if you're still out there.
Mr. Weaver, the jerk who taught Joe everything he knows, was the first step. And throughout, school, did you find that most people were really encouraging of it once they realized you had an aptitude for it?
I did, but the funny thing is, in looking back, I realized I actually had very little aptitude for it. I look at my drawings now and I go, boy, why did they encourage that? That's not a very good drawing, but I did. I think they looked at me and they said, well, he stinks at sports. He's not very good at math. maybe this drawing thing will work out for him because I don't know what else there is. So I did. I had great teachers. My parents always encouraged me. And, that's the great thing about art. You really only need a handful of things, something to draw on, something to draw with, an imagination, and someone to say, yeah, go do that. So I had that. I was lucky.
That's cool. So fast forward to present day, because we have minutes.
It's a long fast forward.
Well, I'm gonna assume
Good.
it's not. I'm gonna assume
Okay.
it's maybe 20 years from kindergarten.
They can't see me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Joe's youthful.
Youthful.
You not only have you opened this museum in Pittsburgh, but you've also been doing a show.
Yes.
Called Once Upon a Toon.
Yes.
Now, how does cartoons translate into
A stage
show?
performance.
Yes.
It's actually a very old vaudeville tradition. Winsor McKay, who has created Gertie the Dinosaur, the first animated cartoon, who created, of course, Nemo, one of the early comic strips, started out doing stage performances where he would illustrate stories as he told them. It's a tradition, of course, that faded with the death of vaudeville. Didn't work well on radio. Robert Ripley tried it. He would still draw on the radio.
Not a very visual medium, the radio.
No, it's not. Not at all. Which is why I'm not drawing tonight. But so when I was 14, I had all this drawings that I'd done and really didn't know what to do with it. And I sort of came upon this idea of just like, well, I should draw stories as I tell them. And I started performing for the younger kids in the elementary schools when I was 14. Gave me something to do. And then it just took off. So by the time I was in my 20s, I was doing, 100, 200 performances a year.
Wow.
And by the time I reached 25, I was touring nationwide.
So how beefy is your drawing forearm? If you're performing and drawing something as you perform, are you
I have very strong thumb and finger, but I can pinch really hard. But that's about it. It's a lot of drawing. I've done as many as 2,000 drawings in a single day.
What?
Just
What?
nonstop.
That's remarkable.
It's up there. I mean, certainly iWorks has me beat, but it's a lot of drawings.
That just reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons where they're talking about, have you ever done a live itchy and scratchy? No, it's a tremendous strain on the cartoonist's
Yeah.
arms. But I mean, that's kind of the analog.
That
right?
is kind of the analog. It's like watching the picture book come alive before your eyes because I'm illustrating the story as I'm telling it. So a single story might be anywhere from 5 to 20 illustrations. So it's constantly moving forward.
And last night at the Taste of PureSpec event, you actually did a story.
Yes.
And it was fantastic.
Thank
It
you.
was
Thank
only 6 drawings, maybe?
It ended up, it was about 6 drawings.
But it was still fantastic.
Well, and the neat thing about what I do is if you talk to kids in particular after my show and say, how many drawings did Joe do? And if it's 6 drawings, they'll say 20. This is an amazing thing. I always say that the imagination is so powerful that in comic strips, the story doesn't take place in those 4 little panels. 4 panels is not enough to tell a story. The real story takes place in the white space in between, where the drawing ends and your imagination takes over. I think the toughest thing any artist does is not in deciding what to draw, but in deciding what not to draw, what to leave to the imagination. And I think that's part of what I do, is have to decide what drawing is going to help a gag along, what propels the story forward. Because it can't just be a drawing that's just out there for the heck of it. It needs to be connected.
Do you think that for a lot of cartoonists or artists, particularly cartoonists, there's a conscious decision of what to leave out and leave to the imagination? Or do you think that that's something that just kind of flows as it's being constructed?
I think it becomes intuitive. I think the biggest weakness that an artist has early on is we are not all innate storytellers. Great cartoonists are always great storytellers, always. Charles M. Schulz, great storyteller. Walt Disney, great storyteller. But if you look at the early comics of any great comic book artist, and they wrote the comics themselves, it is about the entire page is filled up with lots and lots of text, and they draw every single piece of action. It takes a lot of practice to learn how to let that go, and to trust your audience is going to understand what you're trying to say, what your message is, just through an economy drawing.
Yeah. Do you think there's anyone out there that you can think of off the top of your head who's doing that really well in the comic book world?
In the comic book world, I think actually it's not the superhero genre. I think probably the master of that right now is Owly, which I think most people view as a children's book, but it has a great crossover audience. But I think the stuff he's doing is remarkable. Just no words, strictly imagery, and easy to follow, and telling a very interesting and compelling story.
Yeah, right on. So you've got this one man, one beefy arm drawing show, an aptitude for doing so since the age of 5, and then here you are in Pittsburgh, and you decide, are you inspired by what you see in San Francisco?
So what happened is, I 11 years ago was performing in Columbus, Ohio, and their education director comes up to me. He was all 22 at the time, and he said, I'm applying for a job at the Charles M. Schulz Museum. When I get the job, you're going to be the first person I hire. And I said, great kid, thanks, all right. Sure enough, 2 years later, I hear from him, can you send out a video? Jeannie Schultz wants to see what you do. And they asked me to come out for the opening week of the Charles M. Schulz Museum in California. So I fly out there, have an amazing experience at this museum. It's one of the largest museums in the world dedicated to a single artist. In Pittsburgh, we have the Andy Warhol Museum, which is the largest. So it was remarkable. And then I went to San Francisco to visit their cartoon art museum. And immediately it clicked. This is the next museum movement. I had watched children's museums crop up all over the country, and pop art museums crop up, and I said, this is what's next. So I came back to Pittsburgh after 2 weeks and approached the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and said, I want to prototype this. I want a hallway to just test this out, and that's how it started.
And they were pretty open to that? There weren't any qualms, really?
There were after we put up a Zippy the Pinhead exhibit. At that point, we realized their audience was 4 and our audience was 34.
Yeah.
And that was the point at which we sort of said, you know what, this is great, this is not going to work. This is not a good fit for us. And so we started looking for our own home, and we moved to downtown Pittsburgh's cultural district. We sort of said it's putting pop culture in the cultural district.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can picture now this cartoon art museum in a district that has the symphony and the opera and, a lot of 90-year-old people in limos pulling up and stepping out, and now they see a giant Superman comic just plastered, right on that street, and it's, I think it shocked people, which was great. That's what we wanted.
Do you
I think
think
it's a tremendous fit, personally.
Yeah.
It ended up being a great fit.
The blue hair crowd and the people who have those little binocular glasses, I feel like that some comics anywhere have got to be a part of their past as well.
Oh, it is, and that's what I think surprised everyone is the longevity of their youthful memories.
Really?
That we have had we call them the chin strokers. They're the people who come into galleries and stroke their chin and go, oh yes, well, this earlier work was much more pristine, there's a lot of work, there's a certain maturity. And they come into our museum and they see, Bugs Bunny, and suddenly they break down like, oh my God, Bugs Bunny, I love Bugs Bunny. So it does, it washes away. And then we introduce them and say, okay, so you loved Bugs Bunny, let me tell you about Art Spiegelman. And suddenly they begin to gain a real respect for the art. And our gift shop helps a lot with that, because the books in there, people really, they go, oh, this is cartoons too? This is remarkable. So we broke down a lot of walls.
That's great. How long has the museum been open?
We have now been in existence for 4 years. We've been in our downtown location for now 2.5 years, and we just expanded.
And have you watched traffic grow steadily? Can you share any numbers with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's when we first opened, we would have been, we were thinking, you know what? If we can pull in 5,000 people a year to a little museum this small, we're doing okay. We can survive, because we have a lot of great supporters. When we opened our superhero exhibit, we did 10,000 people in 2 months, which is huge for us. Part of that was we opened up our superhero exhibit the same month they were filming Batman in front of our building.
Was that deliberate?
Yes. We had heard a rumor that Batman was going to film in Pittsburgh, but there was no confirmation and no one gave confirmation, and a lot of times those rumors don't come true. I was parked my car and walking past the parking garage, and I recognized one of the people from the Pittsburgh film office, and they're standing there with Christopher Nolan taking a tour of our block. And I realized no one else knows this is Christopher Nolan. No one else knows this is the head of the film office. I'm the only one in Pittsburgh right now who knows they're about the film Batman. And rather than go to the media or start tweeting about it, I went to our office and I said, we're doing a superhero exhibit. And so it was very deliberate.
That's great.
And we timed it out perfect. We actually invited, for the closing week of the exhibit, we invited Jerry Robinson, came to our museum. Jerry doesn't travel as much as he used to. And he's doing his presentation, he finishes up, Christopher Nolan comes into our museum to see Jerry Robinson.
Nice.
So he actually comes in, he spends a good bit of time with us, we talk him around, show him around the exhibit, and so there's this great picture of me, Christopher Nolan, and Jerry Robinson.
That's so cool.
So that's, Batman beginning to now.
No kidding. So are you sort of helping to build or strengthen this comic community, or
Yeah, I mean, that's an important part of our mission, is a museum has to go beyond 4 walls. You have to build that community. You rely on them, it's important. Pittsburgh has a very active cartooning community. We started the Pennsylvania chapter of the National Cartoonist Society in Pittsburgh. We saw a need that there was not enough recognition for independent comic artists, so we started PIX, which is the Pittsburgh Indie Comics Expo, which is now going, it's just finished up its 2nd year, so, and going very strong.
cool?
We also produce what I think may be a first in North America. We did a complete comic book guide to the north side of Pittsburgh. It was so popular, we did 3 runs. We did over 20,000 of these. And then we got approached by a foundation, the Fine Foundation, which is a fine foundation. Came to us and said, we love this, you should do another neighborhood. We said, well, do you have money? And they said, yeah, we'll give you money to do another neighborhood. So now we're doing the Oakland neighborhood. And then we just had another foundation that contacted us 3 weeks ago and said, we heard you're doing Oakland, why aren't you doing downtown? We said, well, it involves money. They go, well, we'll fund you to do downtown. So we actually have 20 different comic book artists, all each taking different venues. So writing about the Children's Museum, the Science Center, the streets, so that by the end of next year, Pittsburgh will be the first city, probably in the world, to have its entire community documented in comic book form.
Hey, that's incredible.
So that's something we've done, and that's because of connections to the community.
So you're using words and images to tell stories about these neighborhoods?
We're using words and images to act as both a guidebook, a history, and tell personal stories. So you learn about, the Carnegie Museum, but you also learn about Andrew Carnegie. Or you learn about Andy Warhol's birthplace and the Andy Warhol Museum, and you learn about Andy Warhol. And it's an eclectic mix. I mean, there's Jim Rugg, who does the comic Aphrodisiac, which is actually pretty popular here in Edmonton, I hear. Mark Zingarelli, who was a collaborator of Harvey Pekar. Just really great people.
Yeah.
And a lot of the young up-and-coming artists, too.
We had a question from the audience.
Right on.
Actually, did you want to come up and ask it, actually?
Sure.
Okay.
Into the microphone, sir.
This is Clinton. He's sitting in the audience, and he has a question for Joe.
Hi, Joe. I was just wondering, how often do you change the displays in the museum?
That's a great question. When we started this, we said, well, let's change them every 4 to 5 months. They change every 2 months. So it's constantly changing. Now that we've added a second gallery, that gives us flexibility. That second gallery was added with the purpose of having a more permanent exhibit and a rotating exhibit, but we're finding that we just want to do more. So we're still rotating all these exhibits through. So it's constantly evolving.
Which was gonna be my next question, do you have anything permanent on display?
We do have, there are a few things that are permanent. We have one of the desks from Walt Disney's first studio, the Hyperion Studios, not his personal studio. It was owned by an animator named Paul Satterfield, who, when it was donated to us, the reason it came to us is he had wanted it to remain forever in use. And so we said, yeah, we'll let people sit at that desk. So they get to come to the Toonseum, they sit at the desk, from the 1930s. Paul Satterfield was a director on the Rite of Spring sequence of Fantasia, and they get this real experience of what it was like. And I always tell them, if you really want to know what it was like to work for Walt Disney, I just sort of stand there and criticize their work. But so it's a real experience, and that's permanent. We also have, as the centerpiece, we have an original Gertie the dinosaur from 1914 by Winsor McKay, one of only about 150 or so that survive. So that always stays up. And then we have a few pieces from Mad Magazine, a few comics that stay up, that mostly rotates.
So it sounds like there's a demand, not a demand, but an opportunity to build more space.
Yes.
Or a need.
There's a constant need to evolve. We were only about, when we opened in the Children's Museum, we were 300 square feet. When we moved downtown, we were 1,500 square feet. Our new expansion, we just opened a new gallery, which I gotta tell you about because it was awesome when we opened it, has now taken us to about 4,000 square feet. So we continue to grow. Our plans are to next annex the symphony. It'd be great.
And make them play cartoon theme songs all the
Yeah,
time.
they'll do it.
Be wicked. So tell us about this gallery launch then.
So when we decided we're gonna open the gallery, we're like, well, who do we name this after? There were some organizations that bought naming rights to sections of the gallery. Starkist, who we love Starkist, because they have Charlie the Tuna. And they said, we're gonna name a section the Charlie the Tuna Hall of Legends. So not even the Starkist Hall of Legends. They said, Charlie the Tuna is our icon. We want him to live in Pittsburgh.
Nice.
Because that's where they're based. But the overall gallery, we're like, well, who do we name this after? We looked at this list of the great cartoonists who had come from Pittsburgh. And for me, one name had always stood out, a man who never got enough recognition, and that was Lou Scheimer. Lou Scheimer was the founder of Filmation Studios, had been born in Pittsburgh. And so this idea is in my head, we're gonna name this after Lou Scheimer. And about a week later, this family comes in. It's a young family, a little girl, she was 14. And the aunt says, tell him who your grandfather is. And he won't know who grandpa is. He says, tell him. My grandpa's Lou Scheimer. Do you know him? He said, are you kidding? We're trying to get in touch with him. Is he around? Where is he? Is he in LA? And she says, oh no, he lives part-time in Pittsburgh. He's engaged. And so he's here all the time. Do you want to meet him? I'm like, meet him? I want to name a gallery after him. So get to meet with Lou. We talked about it, and he was very excited. So our opening day, just last week, we had him cut the ribbon. But we didn't have just cut the ribbon. We found the cast, the actual molding, from the He-Man sword used in the 1986 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And
Wait a minute. Where did you find this thing?
one of our board members, Jim Martin, is a director on Sesame Street. He was also Gary Gnu on the Great Space Coaster. And he said, we gotta find a sword. We gotta find a sword. So he goes to this place out in New York that he works with sometimes and says, hey, I'm looking for a sword that looks kind of like He-Man's sword. And they go, oh yeah, we've got He-Man's sword. They go in a back room and they pull out He-Man's sword.
That's amazing.
So Lou Scheimer, actually we cast it, Lou Scheimer actually cut the ribbon with He-Man's sword.
Oh my gosh.
So it was awesome. And now we're getting orders for these swords. We're only doing 20 of them. And we're getting tons of orders from them, from people in Italy and France who want one of these swords signed by He-Man. And they'll pay the price. Yeah, we're doing it. So it's helping fund the gallery.
That's great. And you managed to, it sounds like, attract international attention. Are you guys, forgive my ignorance, are you using tools like Twitter and Facebook to keep in touch with people? Or?
Yeah, we're amazing. And here's why. We are the smallest museum in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which has some tremendous museums. We were the first museum to have an iPhone app. We were the first museum to have an Android app. We have more Facebook and Twitter followers than most of the big museums.
That's amazing.
We host every 3 months a Bloggers Blast, where we invited all the local and regional podcast bloggers and major Twitter feeds to come to the Toonseum and learn about what we're doing. So we're firm believers in the value and importance of social media. We're only as good as our fans,
Yeah,
and we want to hear from them all the time.
that's great. And you've also managed to get some mainstream media attention. This afternoon, is spending time reading some
We
articles.
have. Again, this is amazing. I worked with the Children's Museum for 20 years before they kicked me out. And I'm amazed by the amount of press we get. There's this huge multi-million-dollar museum, the Children's Museum, and within a week of our opening, we were in the New York Times with a full half-page photo in the New York Times. I got a call from their PR director just mad as heck saying, you know, why didn't you help us do any of this? I go, I don't even know how I did it. You know, and we're in the New York Times, we've been in the Wall Street Journal, and international too, yeah. It's been amazing.
It's obviously something that is on people's minds, that they're deeply interested in. It's actually cool to see that community grow here in Edmonton as well. Because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that there could be similarities between Edmonton and Pittsburgh. We're both industry towns. I don't know how, I mean, a lot of Edmontonians consider them, I would say, blue collar, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. Pittsburgh is an industrial city that reinvented itself as an arts hub and technology city.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of gaming companies now in Pittsburgh, as of course up here. There's a lot of very creative arts going on, as here. Great gallery walks, gallery crawls. So I think you see a lot of similarities. And I think the artists are similar in many respects too, just because they have similar upbringing.
Yeah, that's probably true. Now, because we are an Edmonton-focused show, I do have to ask, what have you thought of your experience here so far, other than the temperature, of course, because that's the first thing I would ask.
I love it. One of the things I have the great opportunity, I joke that I am the geek ambassador of Pittsburgh because I travel so much. That's actually true. Visit Pittsburgh, our Convention and Visitors Bureau, actually funds me to go to comic conventions. They'll actually help pay for our booths. Those of you who were lucky enough to be here at this great event, PureSpec, you got free pickle pins from Heinz. Well, those were donated by Visit Pittsburgh. So I get to go to these great cities, and in exchange, I promote Pittsburgh, talk about what we are, and I steal the great ideas of other cities. So that's what I'll do. I'm gonna steal all your ideas and go back to Pittsburgh.
So pony up, guys, all your good ideas, we
Well,
can
this-
give them to Joe.
I gotta tell you, the one that I absolutely love is Happy Harbor Comics has a artist in residence program,
Yeah,
which I think is great, and I'm hoping that we can make it an international program. We're gonna send a Pittsburgh artist up here, and we're gonna bring one of your Edmonton artists down to Pittsburgh.
That would be phenomenal.
suddenly I wish I was an artist,
So you could go and be in Pittsburgh for a while.
but I would still pretend it was Gotham.
It is Gotham.
That's
It is,
right,
Pittsburgh
there
is
you go.
Gotham.
Yeah,
Chicago hates us now. Pittsburgh is Gotham,
that's right.
which is great. Before that, we were just sort of the zombie capital of the world.
That's right.
Now we're actually Gotham City.
So now Batman gets to fight zombies.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're actually, well, no one from Pittsburgh is gonna hear this yet. We're
they will,
actually,
Jim.
they will eventually.
Yeah.
There
We're
are
not-
amongst our tens of listeners.
We've worked with some of the other businesses in our alley. We're actually renaming the alley where they filmed Batman. We're gonna name it Gotham Way.
Nice.
But we're not doing it through the city. We're just tearing down all the signs one night. And it was fun. And it happened actually. Everybody on the block. We have this really great, amazing block, the 900 block of Liberty Avenue in Pittsburgh. It's phenomenal. And we had this block meeting. I'm like, we should rename the city. Let's find out about the paperwork. And they said, forget the paperwork. Let's just do it. And so there's this group of us that are going to sneak out one night and just change all the signs in the alleyway, and then claim we don't know who did it.
I think that's a great
So
idea.
hopefully the law enforcement in Pittsburgh is not listening.
Well, let's not talk, when you get back home, don't talk about this until after that's happened.
After it's
And-
done,
and-
yeah, we'll just keep it quiet.
Hopefully
Keep it on
they'll,
the DL.
they'll see it as
Yeah.
a flight of
It's a
fancy.
great marketing opportunity, where I can't wait till we have tourists coming, like, is your alleyway where they film Batman? I'm like, yes, it's $5, look out the back door.
We need to build another gallery.
We'll talk about innovative marketing. We do some creative stuff. We actually have our own beer. It's called Illustration Ale. 6 local artists design beer labels, and East End Brewing produces them. We're doing our second run for this year. But one of the things we did, they filmed over the summer, Batman, and they had covered the entire block with this fake snow. I mean, all over the place. And they wouldn't let us clean it up because they're like, no, leave it because we may have to do some reshoots tomorrow. So we had to leave it. And then they said, don't worry, we're gonna come by and we'll clean it all up the next day. And we said, oh, don't worry. We've already got garbage bags filled with it and little plastic vials of Gotham City snow that we'll be selling on eBay next year. So we're fine, we're no worries.
It's a good entrepreneurial spirit.
Well, when you're a nonprofit, you've gotta be creative.
That's right.
Now, I want to take advantage of the fact that you are a comic historian as
Yeah,
well.
well, yes, sure.
I want to, so I have a 6-part question for you.
Okay,
Let's keep it simple, right?
It's fairly
It's
simple.
good.
But I do want to know, what in your opinion are the best comic strip, comic book, and cartoon? And as a counterpoint to that, what in your opinion are the worst comic strip, comic book, and cartoon, in your
Okay.
experience?
okay. I'm gonna start with comic strip because that's really a strong area of expertise. I really love Peanuts. I think Peanuts is a great comic strip. I think it made the most of the medium. When comics were shrinking, he adapted a style that would work and fit well. He tapped into the human experience in the simplicity that Snoopy is who we all want to be and Charlie Brown is who we all are. And I think that was universal. I also think, as I think you talk to any comics historian, they're gonna say Crazy Cat is definitely in there. Pogo is in there. Pogo does not hold up as well today. I think Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes was tremendous. And again, because they tapped into that universal experience and used that space so well. Animation is tough. My favorite animated film of all time is one that does not end up on nearly enough lists, and that is Cats Don't Dance.
I don't think I've.
If you haven't seen it, get it. It was torpedoed by the studio, the same way they torpedoed Iron Giant, that they released it at a really bad time and just really had a great product, a great cartoon, but didn't know who it was for. Cats Don't Dance has Scott Bakula in it, Don Knotts. It's a great cast, and it's about animals in the 1940s being shunned by Hollywood, that they're not allowed to sing or dance anymore. But it's beautifully animated. Gene Kelly, who was from Pittsburgh, acted as a consultant on a lot of the movement and dance in the movie. It's a great movie that not enough people have seen, and it's one of my favorites.
How old is it?
1990s, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it's not that old, but it's just one of those
Just not on
forgotten ones.
anybody's radar.
Not
because
anybody's
of
radar,
time.
and it doesn't,
Yeah.
you don't see it on Netflix or anything, so.
We
But
started
go ahead.
Netflix campaign.
There's a lot of stuff you don't see on Netflix,
Yeah.
to be fair.
But it's a great cartoon, definitely watch that. And then, I'm a fan of a lot of the Disney stuff, just because it's what I grew up with and love. But I think that's my favorite. My favorite TV cartoon, I mean, there's too many. I think that, I do think that Rocky and Bullwinkle is probably my favorite because it was brilliant in that it took all these great radio stars and basically transported their show onto this irreverent, medium of television.
I was a little surprised actually, because I attended your earlier panel, which
Yes.
was the Saturday morning cartoon
Mhm.
panel. And I was a little surprised Rocky and Bullwinkle didn't.
Well, because Rocky and Bullwinkle was prime time.
Ah, there you go. It was not a Saturday morning
It
cartoon.
was not technically, it became a Saturday morning cartoon as much like the Flintstones did too.
Yeah.
The Flintstones, they were a primetime cartoon.
It's funny that you talk to some people and they think Family Guy or The Simpsons, they don't consider cartoons to be, I guess, I don't know if this is the right word, but legitimate television. So why would a show like that be on primetime? They don't really know much about it. They think it's just a
Well,
cartoon.
they don't know their history either. I mean,
That's right.
the Flintstones, and there's interesting things. Simpsons shares some stuff in common with the Flintstones and some stuff in common with Rocky and Bullwinkle. Homer J. Simpson and Bartholomew J. Simpson are attributed to J. Ward, Rocket J. Squirrel, and Bullwinkle J. Moose. Homer Simpson's best friend is Barney Gumble. Fred Flintstone's best friend is Barney Rubble.
I've actually never put that
So
together.
they're both sort of these homages. So that's one thing about Matt Groening. Matt Groening knew his history.
Yeah.
He really did. I mean, the Flintstones did commercials for Winston cigarettes.
Yeah.
So it was very
Kids
adult.
weren't buying cigarettes.
Yeah.
Not even back then.
No, it was the honeymooners, as everyone knows. It was the honeymooners.
Yeah.
So cartoons being for adults or cartoons being bright time isn't a new thing.
It just kind of went through a phase where cartoons kind of became
The Saturday morning.
associated with kids. That might have been because of the Saturday.
Yeah, because
Before it kind of went back towards kind of prime time.
yeah, it definitely did. Just because it was cheap and they needed something to throw on Saturdays, which was a kid hour. So they had all these old Looney Tune cartoons laying around, all these old Mighty Mouse cartoons, packaged them up whether they're appropriate for kids or not,
Mhm.
and threw them in on Saturday morning. And then before you know
Looney
it,
Tunes was barely appropriate for kids.
Well, and the Flintstones certainly wasn't forward thinking in terms of gender issues. If you wanted to get really technical about it, I mean, it was a sexist show because it was from that era. Do kids get that out of the cartoon? Probably not. They get.
They get that Fred Flintstone just dropped a bowling ball on his head.
Yeah,
And now
Yeah.
thinks that he's a famous race car
and then
driver.
his toe is throbbing. And it's this big. I love that.
yeah, I mean, there's the rich tradition of cartoon violence. It's so important. It started all the way. We watch when we have kids come in to the Toonseum. We show them Gertie the Dinosaur, and this cartoon is almost 100 years old, 1940, 100 years old, and every time Gertie picks up the mastodon and throws it into the lake, the kids roar with laughter. Kids love violence. It's so universal and so wonderful. We do not let kids be violent enough. I know that sounds strange, but Fred Rogers always said, what do you do with the mad that you feel? We need to give kids an outlet to express it. And I say, cartoons, that's great. Let Wile E. Coyote drop an anvil on a roadrunner. No kid is going out, getting an anvil, and dropping it on somebody. Let them express their violence through fantasy. I think it's important that we allow them. You don't want it penned up. I think cartoons give that outlet for kids and adults too.
So what are your thoughts on mashing up old cartoons, sort of in the style of what some of the Adult Swim cartoons have done with Space Ghost and Harvey Birdman has brought in,
Mhm.
the Flintstone characters, but sort of repurposed. Do you watch those? Do you find them interesting?
I do. I think they're hilarious. And I think it's part of there's really two ways to go with animation. Your audience remembers these. Your audience was 9. Your audience is now 39. They have kids of their own. So you can put the Smurfs back as a movie, put the Smurfs back on TV so they can share it with their children. That's great. That works with certain properties. For others, you can actually say, hey, those kids have grown up now. Let's let them in on the joke about Scooby and their little munchie problem. And that's the other direction. I think things like C-Lab, sort of say, hey, this is kind of obvious now that we're grown up. Let's explore it a little bit.
And the Venture Brothers, the way they make fun of Johnny Quest.
Yeah, I think it's just we all grew up, and now we're saying, that was funny it's much funnier for a different reason now. Let's explore that, and let's do it together. We're all adults now. Let's go back and look at your childhood and ruin it for you, which is great.
Ruin, make it better.
Make it better as an adult, but it certainly takes some childhood memories and makes them interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure that my memory of Johnny Quest now is totally warped. Like if I tried to recall the show, I'd probably just picture Venture Brothers or something like that.
Yeah, I think if you talk to a certain generation and you say, boy, Space Ghost was a great show, they go, you mean the talk show?
Yeah.
Talk show guy?
Are you getting enough oxygen?
Yeah,
It's the guy who was really high on himself all the time.
Yeah, it's,
We sometimes do the show that way where we just ask the guest questions about us. Are you getting enough oxygen? Do you think I'm doing well? Sitting here asking you questions.
It's all right,
I think it's
play me
good.
to the desk.
And the thing that's the big joke I find in a lot of those Adult Swim cartoons is the cell animation. They make so much fun of it, the recurring backgrounds and just the way that cartoons were made back then.
Yeah, oh, well, and one of my favorite things, I'm a big fan of Filmation, and obviously with Lou Scheimer, but they took cells, backgrounds, that they used for Star Trek in the early 1970s, and used those same backgrounds for He-Man in the late 80s. So you want to talk about repurposing? If it was laying around, it was going to get reused at some point.
Wasn't there some Rocket Robin Hood stuff that was reused in the Spider-Man cartoon too, I heard?
Yes.
Oh, they reuse stuff all the time, and Hanna-Barbera did it too, which has become one of the things that's difficult. We'll come across a great background piece, and we'll go, oh, that's from Scooby-Doo, and it says, oh, someone will say, oh no, that was from Super Friends. Like, well, it may have been both, right?
It probably was.
It probably was, so no way to determine at this point.
That's fantastic. So we're getting to that point.
He didn't say what his least favorite was.
That's
I
right.
didn't.
Was
Okay.
that deliberate?
That was deliberate, because
If you're uncomfortable
I am a
with-
member of the National Cartoonist Society, so I know these people. So I'm gonna try and pick dead people.
It's easier that way, he doesn't have to justify it.
I don't. My least favorite comic strip, that is really tough because I know more of those guys than I do any other. But there are a lot. You know what? I'm just gonna say it. I'm sorry if they're listening, but Mary Worth, it's time to retire. The soap operas have come and gone. People aren't reading the comic strips every day, so the idea of serials do not work the way they used to. So I do think it's time for Rex Morgan and Mary Worth to say, this is it. Brenda Starr retired last year, which was sad, but at the same time, that's a genre in the comic strip world that has way outlived its lifespan. Animation that I really don't like, there's just too much of it. I love cartoons, but in my generation, did we really need, Chuck Norris cartoon and a Mr. T cartoon? There's a lot of stuff we didn't need that I look back and I go, oh, wow, that was really bad. It's fun to watch now, but it was really bad stuff.
With hindsight and irony.
Yes.
There are certain cartoons you watch, and I think we've talked about this on the show before, like Transformers, which was designed to sell toys.
Yeah, and G.I. Joe and so many others.
Absolutely does not hold up at all. It is so obviously almost tacked on. Seems like the thought of a marketing company, really.
Well, it really was.
Yeah.
I mean, Hasbro was going to all these studios and saying, here's our product, come up with a story. I mean, literally, that's, how He-Man, Mattel went to Filmation and said, we got a product, you got a story?
You have cars that turn into robots and you want a story.
Yes, that's exactly it.
They could
That's
be
all
from
that.
space.
I actually think that'd be a great assignment, nowadays. I guess no one's really doing that anymore.
Yeah, not
Oh,
as much,
Not as
They
much.
still do.
they still do.
I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Bakugan, those are all just off the top of my head.
Well,
They're
yeah.
all on things, but they're designed to sell a video game or a card game or all of the above.
Oh, and every animated cartoon has to have the plush. It's like, what's the Batmite? What is that character that we can turn into a stuffed animal that is totally gratuitous, unnecessary to the plot, but it's like, this would be a good stuffed animal.
Actually, and I guess that's what's happening with Angry Birds right now. Like, they're a game, now there are plushes, and I've heard rumor of a film or television.
They are doing an animated series. So where's the story?
Yeah, I don't know.
Where's the story?
Birds
They're
fighting
birds,
pigs,
they're really
like
angry,
crashing into stuff.
and they hate pigs.
It kind of writes
Because the
itself.
pigs
It
are
does
still
kind of, yeah,
around.
now you think of it, it sort of does work, yeah,
It's certainly no stranger than the stuff we grew up on.
yeah.
That is true. All perfectly good fodder for the stoner nowadays, I should say.
All right, now, officially, it is that time.
It is
For
that
Adam's favorite part of the show.
You mean the Fast 15?
I sure do.
So you've listened to the show, I'm sure, since we started it 2 years ago, Joe.
Yes, absolutely, it's my favorite show on the interweb.
Most gratified to hear that. So what the Fast 15 is for every guest we have on, We ask them 15 questions.
Okay,
The first 13 are standard questions we ask of all our guests, but then tailored to you at the end. We give you 2 wild card questions.
all right,
So, and it's supposed to be fast.
all right, so start the timer.
Here we go. Start the timer, the Fast 15 with Joe Wos. Number 1, your favorite food.
Chicken Parmesan,
Your favorite color.
a red.
Mac, PC, or Linux.
It was PC, but I just bought a Mac.
Yes. Dogs or cats?
Dogs,
Coffee or tea?
either.
Any hot beverage of any kind?
Hot chocolate,
There you go. Favorite holiday?
Halloween.
Favorite sport?
I'm from Pittsburgh, it's mandatory football.
The Steelers,
They
absolutely.
have to, they excommunicate you.
Your favorite pastime?
Drawing.
Your favorite music at this particular moment?
Favorite music district, William Shatner.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry.
No, there's nothing to apologize
Love it.
about at all.
Your favorite movie right now?
Favorite movie right now, wow.
I know, that's a tough one.
That one
That's-
often stumps people.
That one does because there's stuff out there, but nothing that's my favorite right now. I'm gonna wait until they come out with the Hong Kong Fooey movie.
All right.
He's preemptively naming that.
Yeah, that's gonna be my favorite.
That's bold. Your favorite video game?
Favorite video game, I'm old school, Super Mario.
Right on. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
One superpower, the ability to bend time to my will,
We got a couple extra hours in the day.
That's, yeah.
especially at this convention.
You got stuff to do, that's fair.
Yeah.
Star Wars or Star Trek? It's okay, don't worry about it, just answer honestly.
This is really tough. Star Wars up until the last 3.
Fair
That's
enough.
a frequent answer, you'd be
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah, and now we're on to our 2 wild card questions. Number 1, what do you think is, in your experience, one of the most difficult things to draw, or that you just dislike having to draw?
This is the answer. I'm gonna give you an honest answer that no one is brave enough to make. And this is probably male cartoonists only. I find it very difficult and challenging to draw women.
Yeah.
I can never get it right. Probably because I'm a geek and don't have a lot of experience. But I do find that's very common, that if you look at cartoonists, their drawings of women, it's like, just draw a guy and give it long hair and some added features. You know, it's, they can't get a handle on it because they've never had a handle on it. So, that's that, yeah, women, tough to draw.
Fair enough. And our last wild card question, first of all, before I ask the question, how long are you staying in?
I arrived here on Tuesday, so I've been here for a full week. I leave Monday morning.
Okay, so I was gonna ask you, what's something you wanted to see but didn't get a chance? Is there anything?
I'm trying to think if there's anything, I got a chance to see a lot.
And what was that, let me change it up.
Why do you have the Santa Maria in your mall? I know Columbus got lost a lot, but when was he in Edmonton? And did he forget where he parked his boat in the mall? It is for those who've never been to Edmonton, or more importantly, those who've never been to the mall, they have a life-size creation of the Santa Maria, and they're very proud of it. But you also have there some sea lions and, I don't know what.
There's an amusement park.
Well, I went on the roller coaster because I am a coaster enthusiast, so.
The mind bender.
And did it bend your mind?
A little bit, a little bit.
So to answer your question,
To ask my question.
well,
Oh,
you,
to answer
you,
my
you
question.
asked
Go
about
ahead,
Santa
yes,
Maria,
go
so
ahead. Here's your fast answer.
Because we could. That's why the Santa Maria.
Because it
was
is
built.
there.
Yeah.
Don't you wish it was the Enterprise?
Of course.
Yeah, see?
Every single enterprise that's ever been made, in fact. So you've seen a lot. What have you enjoyed seeing the most while you've been here, other than pure speculation?
Other than pure speculation, of course. What have I enjoyed seeing? Not the snow. We have snow too, just not this early. I've really just more than anything else enjoyed visiting the comic book shops.
Right on.
You have a really great community. I was really impressed. Happy Harbor, they have a new shop, and just they have a great kids section, they have a great adult section. It's really thought out. The selection was amazing because they had one of the flaws of comic book stores is they never have comic strips, and they had a ton of that stuff, and they had stuff from magazines, and so I've really enjoyed that and talking with the people who own these stores. You have a great community here.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate. So that's it for the Fast 15. That's almost it for the show. I just wanted to add, before I thank you, of course, that we did receive some Movember beer from Rickards Red. But as we wish to respect the rules of Grant McEwen University here, we didn't crack them open for the show. But they also sent us a Movember T-shirt,
November t-shirt.
which
Awesome.
I would like to pass on to you.
That would be great.
And the T-shirt
In lieu of a
says-
mug.
That's right. It says, raise your glass, support the stash. So there you go.
And I do have a very youthful mustache.
You absolutely do. And
Yes.
actually, everyone here at this table has a mustache. Scott deliberately growing his for November.
I sure am.
Well
You're
done.
doing okay.
Yeah.
It's coming. If there's one thing I can do and do well, it's grow hair. So,
So here you are, Joe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
I
so much
appreciate
for
it.
joining
yes,
us and
it's
for
been
letting us
fantastic.
record the show with you. It's been great.
Almost sort of kind of live in front of some people.
Yeah,
Who
thanks.
stayed
Some
late.
people, I mean, this
Who
is
stayed
a
late.
tremendous
Thousands.
audience.
Woo! Yeah.
Thank you all. Here at the Ewan McGregor University Auditorium. No, that's not it.
Yes, Ewan McGregor University.
Mr. McGregor,
Grant McEwen.
Grant McEwen.
That's the one, yeah.
Though I think it would be
Michael
more fun if it
McKean
was.
University.
There you
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you.
We should take a moment
Yes.
to thank our sponsor,
A singular sponsor of this show.
who is very near and dear to our hearts, and has a program, in fact, that is very near and dear to this subject.
Absolutely.
We are, of course, referring to Edmonton's Hogwarts of digital media.
Guru Digital Arts College.
That is correct, with its Dumbledore-esque headmaster, Owen Brierley,
He's bearded and has a phoenix that rides around on his shoulder.
and is eccentric.
Yes, but they have a sequential art program. So they do diplomas with people, and actually they've got an artist there named Nat Jones who drew 68, has worked with Rob Zombie on a number of projects, and has even drawn Spawn cartoons. So there you go. They've got a great program, and we're glad that they sponsor this show so that we can,
Continue to do the show.
exactly.
That's right. So if you are interested in changing your career and are looking at a digital option, you could go to no finer place than Guru Digital Arts College.
That's gurudigitalarts.ca.
And we're not just saying that because they paid us to.
But maybe we are.
And I highly recommend you give up that career in law and pursue digital arts and cartooning. It's much more rewarding. Not lucrative, but rewarding.
And that's what this is all about. Rewards. Thank you again, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Now go to the shindig.
Off to the shindig. Thank you, guys. Yeah, please send me an email once it's up so I can send
Try
out
to
the
get
word.
it up Wednesday.
I'll be back in Pittsburgh by then.
Cool. So when does it actually snow there?
It actually snowed on Halloween, which was sort of a fluke, but I did call and it was 67 degrees Fahrenheit today, which is end of summer weather. It was very
Well,
warm.
15
Yeah, it was very, very warm. No jackets at that point.
That's awesome.
Thanks for coming.
How long have you had
What's
that?
that? Oh, yes, yes. 100
Dave's license plate, you may have seen
and
it. Just says,
favorite.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm biased to a couple things. One, my actual favorite wooden coaster is in my home town. Anyway, Park, the Thunderbird.
you picked a good,
I think it's one of the best
good
wooden
story.
coasters.
You picked a good Star Trek as well.
And then I'm also
I'm an Iron
getting
Character.
just because the first.
The only
Hour.
autograph I'm missing is calling my
I
calendar.
just rode this summer, I went down to, spent 3 days in Virginia. I did Bush.
Yeah, I maintain that it
and I
is the
did,
best Star Trek.
Keith Dominion.
I
Head
just,
and shoulders above
Dominator now?
Next Generation.
I have just finished
Dominator is pretty fantastic.
watching
Playing
DS9 again.
Finally,
You know,
you've
in
turned.
versions.
You've turned.
But I will say this.
TNG was good. I'm not dumping on TNG, and people often assume that I am. I am not. It was good.
World Part 1 and 2 is one of
Yeah,
my
yeah,
favorites,
that's right.
two-part episodes.
It is a good one.
But DS9
And it's indoors,
is
which, adds something to it.
season fact.
The only other indoor ones that pin on.
I have to defend Star Trek against Battlestar Galactica.
No, the Sahara, which.
You'd have to as well.
Indiana, and then New York, New York.
Maybe the old one and the new one, maybe just in
Yeah,
general.
it is a bit rough.
But the thing is, as I understand it, we don't get to decide. We randomly throughout the panels get switched out, depending on that year, which should be interesting.
Vegas Starter Convention last year.
She looks way better there than in the Captain's
How about your-
documentary. She looked
What
like.
nemesis in England?
Well,
Oh,
he was
I haven't-
doing
I haven't
work
been
on
to
Rozen,
any
he had
of
his hair blonde as a
Because
spice.
I get hit by,
You know, last year.
Oh, yeah, see, I
had
have
that
that
or
in the US.
hair dark and
except
all.
but the US.
Yeah.
Sure.
Have you met them
Yeah,
all
I've
then
heard
except for
that
Colmini? Or?
Yeah.
We have changed. We actually.
Do you travel around with them?
I was going to the Vegas convention, but I had my phone in my brain.
I've been on ones in like some bizarre places. West Virginia only has one, but I've been on it. Kansas has one, you know, in Iowa. Yeah, well, and also, there's some that, you know, are still staying, like, Louisiana.
I'm 6.5 inches.
Jazz, which I did get to ride for, like, open my